Join the association is $20 a year. You get 4 newsletters each year and mailed to you. It's very worthwhile if you could join. Also, the museum, as many of you know, is on Main Street, 207 East Main Street in the old Kaufman's Hardware building. We have a new display there, and I'm going to let someone else speak about that in just a minute. But next month, our program is by Judy Stavisky, and it's about, oh, Mitch, I can never read right. Voices of Amish Women in Lancaster County. And then our May meeting, I'm going to turn this over to Don Horning to talk about that and our new display. And then we have one other person to speak before we introduce our guest tonight.
Good evening. I've had the pleasure of working with the FFA, that's Future Farmers of America, the past 3-4 weeks. I wish you could have joined me because there is a malaise sometimes that hits us, and that we don't think that there's any future, that these young people don't really care. You should see the people I worked with. They are sharp. They are good. Our local CNH has been a sponsor of FFA for 75 years. The local chapter of FFA is 65 years old this year, and so we have turned over a great portion of Main Hall to them, and they put up an exhibit of all their activities through the years and lots of explanation of what FFA is, and I couldn't be more proud of them and what they do. We added to it in the West Hall by putting a compatible exhibit called Farms, Barns, and Mills. And we have another display called Farm Sales and Equipment. And so these are complementary. So if the FFA, you can walk through that and you see what the kids have done, then you can come and see some of our local scenes as well. So that's at the museum. I'm going to also try and get you to put on your calendars the May meeting that will be right here. And the title of the meeting is The Scribbler. Jack Brubaker talks about his life, local heritage, and the column. How many people know this and read The Scribbler? Put up your hands, please. Oh my goodness. You have to be here. Jack has never sat for an interview about his life, but he has consented to do this in May, on our May meeting. So here is my pitch to you. This is this opening of some of our publicity we'll use. When you want to know something about the know-nothing political party, you have to find someone who can tell you something. And that's Jack Brubaker, the Scribbler. That is who he is, and that's not just something I pulled out of the air, because that was his column just a couple days ago, a couple Sundays ago. You might have seen that. So you will want to be here and hear his story. I had to pull a little teeth to get it done. And Christine, his wife, will be along, because behind every successful man, there's a woman. And so she'll be here as well. So please make sure 2 months from tonight you're here.
With some regularity, folks will come up to us and say, hey, I'd really like to get involved to a greater degree with New Holland Historical Society and our museum. I'd like to be a little more supportive. I'd like to help. What can I do? And we tend to stand around and go, Well, we've tried to address that and come up with a list of things that we could identify that we would be delighted to have anyone who's interested in donating some time to support the activities of the Historical Society. There's a broad gamut of things here, from anyone who might enjoy cleaning or potentially typing up newspaper articles, helping us with events like this, to people who maybe enjoy playing around with a computer. Believe it or not, we do a lot of that. So if anything that we've managed to put on this list is of interest to you, there's an email on here that you could send an email to and say, hey, this is Joe Blow. I'd really be interested in talking about how I might be able to help with cleaning. But I won't be sending one of those. There's also a phone number on there that you can call and just provide your name and something that looks on here like it might be interesting to you as well. If you have an interest in supporting our efforts and it's not on this list, send an email or call me and say, I really don't want to clean, but I'd like to help. I'm pretty sure we'd be able to come up with something. So if you're interested in supporting us, and we've been kind of a failure in the past at trying to help identify ways that you might be able to join our efforts, this is an attempt to try and make it a little more clear and a little more inviting. So this is just a pack of papers with the lists that we have developed so far on it. I'm going to place it right here on the piano. Please feel free to stop up and grab one or two after the program. Thanks.
If I could take another 45 seconds, my grandmother was born in 1900, which means she grew up through both world wars, Depression. She never learned to drive, which was typical for that age. And twice a month, she wanted to go to Wat and Shands. So lucky for me, I was a youngster in the 60s, old enough to know. Had the tremendous opportunity to go in there and park in the garage, walk across this, seemed like a wooden enclosed special built construction ramp from the parking garage into Wat and Shand. And we would do our shopping and then go down on the main floor, go over to Hager's, the Five and Dime store. So that was always a great trip. A few years back, even today, at public auctions, you'll see a Wat and Shand empty box go across the stand for a lot of money. It's amazing the staying power of Wat and Shand.
All right. With that note, we're in for a treat tonight. We have Nancy Groff. She's the great-great-granddaughter of Peter Watt, and she's going to give us a nice history lesson of the history of Wat and Shand. So, Nancy, you're on.
This microphone on? Is this microphone on?
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I'm just going to leave my bottle of water. Wow, what a group. Thank you so much for coming. I can guarantee you one thing, you're going to historically learn something about Lancaster City and Lancaster County when I'm done speaking. You will learn something. I would request, please, that you do not take pictures of me when I'm here, standing up front. It's very distracting. You can take pictures later. So the first thing that a lot of people ask me is, how in the world did you get the motivation to write this book? What prompted you to do this? Well, I think it had to do something with that nasty professor that I could hardly stand, but that's beside the point. Anyway, I am a graduate of Brandywine School of Nursing. I did some of my college work at Millersville, but I did the rest of it, all of it, at Immaculata University. I graduated from Brandywine and then started working, and then, of course, eventually went back to Immaculata in Malvern, Pennsylvania, and got 2 more nursing degrees. And of course, that really set me on to getting some incredible jobs. And also, that's how I met Sue Brenneman, fellow nurse. But anyway, at some point, this professor said, and of course, his course had nothing to do with nursing. And as some of you may know, that's the deal. A lot of times you have to take courses that don't have anything to do with your major. But anyway, his was a sociology/history thing. And I love history, so I guess I sort of struggled through it. But anyway, he said, now, in 2 weeks, I want you to all write a paper. So he put all the qualifications up on the board, and then he said, here's a list of subjects. And I'm looking at the subjects and going, no, 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 no. Then I saw bingo. It said family history. At that time, I was the director of nursing of a nursing home, And I did not have a lot of time to put together a paper that would have involved something I didn't know anything about. But this family history, I knew that from when I was very little. My grandmother pumped my head through all of our history in our family and the history of Lancaster City and Lancaster County. So that is how the paper got started. So it was 7 pages, and of course I submitted it and then put it away in the big box that says Immaculata on it, and I never looked at it again. But then my cousin, who is an attorney, he kept calling me from the courthouse, and he goes, "Nancy, do you still got that paper?" And I said, "Yes, it's in that Immaculata box." He goes, "Well, get it out, because I got something good here." And he evidently was doing some research at the courthouse, and he found the date that Peter Watt became a citizen. So after that, he kept calling me, "Get out the paper, I found some more info." So he really was the one that did encourage me to, let's produce this paper, and at least for our family, let's produce it. And I will say that the book has taken off, and we are very, very pleased and certainly appreciate your attendance tonight in support of the book. It is strictly Lancaster City, Lancaster County. If you live in Alabama, you wouldn't care about it. But it is strictly for Lancaster County. Now, I'm going to comment on these slides as we go through. And also, afterwards, you can go and look at the artifacts I have up there, and at the end of my speech here, I'll tell a little bit about the artifacts. And my friend Karen and John Frymuth were kind enough to help me set the tables up and guide me into this room. And Karen will be sitting in the back there at that table where the blue tablecloth is. I do have the books for sale. They are $25. The posters are $15 and $7. Okay, so this is the front of a calendar. And of course, this is the front of the cover of the book. It's not forwarding. I know it's me. Well, I turned it off. No, that one.
That's your second slide.
Okay.
Just keep pushing it.
All right, thank you. Many of you will recognize this. This is the clock that is on the front, right in Penn Square at Watton Chance. Okay, now this is Orkney Island. And down here, of course, is the coast of Scotland. And this, of course, is in the North Sea. And this is where Peter Watt came from, Orkney Islands. And this little island right here is Stronsay. That's where he was born and raised. It's only 7 miles long. They have one school, one church, one post office, and one petrol station. And of course, I love it over there. It's very nice and very calm. This is where he grew up. Now, on this Stronsay, which is where he grew up, he grew up with his parents and his 5 other brothers, no sisters. But all of a sudden, something happened to his father, and his father was taken by what I guess would presume be now pneumonia. But he died, and so the oldest brother then was in charge of the farm, which the farm is something that Peter was not real happy with. He didn't like shirting the sheep, and he didn't like messing with the cows. So he bought out his portion, and he went to live in Kirkwall. Now, Kirkwall, no, it's right about there. So there he's got a job at a place called Peace and Low, and this was a department store, and he did everything. He took the shutters down at night put them back up and put the shutters off in the morning, put them back at night. And he swept the porches, and he swept inside and cleaned up. So he learned from bottom up how to run a store. Now, they were very, very surprised, the people at Peace and Low, that all of a sudden their little bank account was not little anymore, and they were making quite a profit. So they said to Peter, well, you know, how about if we send you over to America and you can go to a town named Boston, and it's in Massachusetts, and you can learn all about accounting and how to attract customers, and then you can come back here to Stroncy and use everything you learned here in Stroncy to really increase the Peace and Low store. Well, as you can imagine, he came over here and he went to the store where he was going to learn all this stuff. And this was Brown, Thompson, and McWhitter. And he started learning. Well, then he met two friends, Gilbert Thompson and James Shand. They were both from southern Scotland, and he had never met them, of course, before. So at some point, they formed a partnership. Then they decided that they would try to have their own store. They weren't going to go back to Scotland. They're going to have their own store. No, they went to Elmira, New York, and they didn't think the prospects looked too good there. They also went to Birmingham, also went to Albany. Didn't see much that they really liked. And then they said, well, let's go to Delaware. Let's see if we can find something in Delaware. They looked all around Wilmington, but they didn't see much that would encourage them. And then somebody said, well, why don't you check out the capital of Pennsylvania, Harrisburg? Well, they went to Harrisburg and turned around right away and left. But then somebody in Harrisburg actually said to them, well, you know, you ought to try that little town of Lancaster. They have in the middle of their town an area called Penn Square. And this is where these merchants set up their little shops, and they have lots of good little shops there. Well, they set it up and formed a partnership. So here we are. This is when the store first opened, and this was on March the 9th, 1878. And there was only 5 employees, and you can see Peter here, and of course James is on the other side. Now, after a year after the store was opened, Mr. Gilbert Thompson unfortunately passed away, so they bought out, from the widow, they bought out his share. And of course then it was always known as Watt and Shands. Now, one thing that they wanted to do was they wanted to make sure that this store of theirs was going to thrive. And they decided they needed something to attract customers, to make the building look nice. Now, as you can see, it says Watt and Shand, the New York store. Well, there was another gentleman that had that store because they were renting this building up until now. And he called his store the New York store. So that's where that comes from, and I think sometimes people get that a little confused. Now, this is Mr. E. Urban. You may have heard of him before. He is an architect, and of course he's done many, many buildings in Lancaster City, Lancaster County. And if any of you get a chance to go and listen to a speaker named Greg Scott, he has written a book all about Mr. Urban. Believe me, the book is worth the price, and it's worth it to hear him talk about Lancaster and Mr. Urban. So Mr. Urban designed this store. Now, this was in 1888. Now, at some point, Peter did go back to Stroncy to marry his childhood sweetheart, and her name was Lizzie. So that was in the summer of 1882. So he brought Lizzie back to Lancaster, and guess what happened 10 months later? She had twins. One was my grandmother, and the other one was, of course, my grandmother's sister named Catherine. Unfortunately, Lizzie died about 5 days later, after these twins were born. So at some point, Mr. Watt did employ a nurse for some afternoons, but basically, Mr. Shand and Mr. Watt changed those diapers and fed those two babies. This is just a picture. This is about 1905. And you can see how Mr. Urban had designed this store. And of course, you can see down over to the right, those are just, one was a newspaper office and one was some other store. So the connection of the other stores down South Queen had not been designed yet. They were there for the, let's see, where are we going? Now, this is Columbia, Pennsylvania, and Watt and Shands had a store there. The building is still there. People said that they liked that little store in Columbia, but that trolley went right by the door in Columbia, and it went right in town to Lancaster. So they thought it was easier just to hop on the trolley, because of course the store in Lancaster had more of a selection. And this is an advertisement for men's and boys' furnishings. This is an ad from Columbia. Now we're going to talk about three different people. I'll show you their pictures. This is Betty Seeblist. This is Alvin Duffy. And this is Thomas Charles McKeel. Now we'll go back a couple and we'll talk a little bit about Betty. Betty was from Ohio, and she was a very good artist. She went to college in Missouri and then started to work for a department store in Missouri. And her main thing was drawing the ads, the clothing ads. Well, then at some point, I guess she got to know the town and the area a little more, and there was an Air Force base in this town, and that is where she met Mr. Seeblist. And Mr. Seeblist was from Lancaster. So, of course, he brought his bride back to Lancaster. And then she proceeded to get a job at Garvin's, and then proceeded to get a job at Watt and Shand. And I'm going to flip through a few things, and you're going to recognize some of her drawings. Just there. And here she is at her table at home drawing the clothing. And what she did was she would go down to Watt and Shand's, or her son or her husband would go down, and they'd give her a suitcase. And this maybe had a coat in it, or a bridal gown, or something like that. So then she'd bring that back to her house and put it on a mannequin and sit there and draw it. And then eventually take these drawings back to Watt and Shand. And of course, then they were in the newspaper. Now, you might recognize this one. This was done by Betty. And this one was also done by Betty. Betty again. And then, of course, when the garage was built, they had her do this. So that's not as pretty as the dresses. So at some point, when I found this research, I did the research and found out about Betty, I then was able to contact her son. And turns out then he wrote about 2.5 pages of the book for telling about Betty, what Betty did for the store. So I was very grateful to him for that. And he came to one of my presentations when I did it in Lidditz. Now, let's look at the other people. Now, first, something interesting that the son told me, Paul Seeblist. He said there's a lot of things he remembers about his mother, of course, and he remembers the drawings, and of course, her going into Watt and Shand's and him going along, and he just remembered all these little items. But he said what stuck out in his mind was his mother had done extensive drawings for the paper one week, and she had a deadline to meet. So that turned out that then the husband and the son took the drawings down to Watton-Shan. And it was closing time, and they drove through the square, and they were shocked. There was no traffic. No traffic at 5 o'clock at Penn Square. That's sort of odd. So then they remembered what day it was. And all I have to do is say the date, and you will remember. November the 22, 1963. Okay, let's go back and look. Okay. Now, meet Mr. Alvin Duffy. And like I said, I think that these are three main people that really had a lot to do with promoting the store and contributing to Lancaster's welfare. Well, Alvin Duffy was the person who decorated up the windows. And fabulous job. But he used to decorate the candy department, and he'd make these beautiful displays with candy. So the head honchos at Watton-Shan said, you know, maybe you better start doing windows. So he has decorated the most beautiful windows. And one thing that he did was when Watton-Shan bought Apple and Weber, that was down on Queen Street, about where Schaub's shoe store was. And they bought Apple and Weber. So he was just trying to think of good ways to be able to sell the jewelry or the china, whatever they were trying to sell that week. So what he did was that he took the windows, he looked at the windows, he painted them all black, except for one small area in the center, which had a huge light that shined just on one piece of jewelry. So that was what he also, when he went to Park City, he did the displays there. So I must tell you something really funny about Mr. Duffy and how I met him. And there's one person in this room that's going to be able to associate that with, and that's Sue Brenneman. I had to take a sip of water. Okay, so as I told you, I'm a registered nurse, and one of the best jobs I've had is teaching nursing students. And that's where I met Sue. And I was one of the nurses that hopped around and went from place to place. I didn't stay in one place too long. They just used me as a fill-in if somebody was sick or taking a vacation, which that was fine with me because I got to meet a lot of people and I got to enhance my education a lot. So one day in the morning, our boss, Carolyn Voorhees, called me in the morning. She said, "Oh, Nancy, so-and-so's sick. Can you go out to St. Anne's home this morning?" Okay. So I got ready and went out to St. Anne's home. Very nice place. And so I was helping the students, and they were getting their medications ready. And these were students that are about ready to graduate, so now they're into giving the pills. And this one girl said, "I must go to room 402, and I have his meds ready." I said, "Okay, why don't you and I sit down and talk about his meds?" So we did, and of course I quiz him on the meds. And I wouldn't say I was nasty. I was to the point that they better know what they're giving it and what they're giving it for and who they're giving it to. So she did a very nice job. And I said to her, "Well, why don't you go ahead and go in the gentleman's room and I'll follow you." Of course, now what she didn't know was that she went in the room and I was standing outside the room listening to her to make sure she was asking him the correct questions. You know, the name, the birthday, etc. So, and this was Alvin Duffy's room. So I stood outside the room and I listened to her, and she was doing a really good job. And I thought, well, I guess I can go in now. So I walked in the room and I about had a heart attack. It's like the whole room was full of Watton-Shan. There wasn't an inch on the wall that I could see for Watton-Shan posters or Watton-Shan trophies or all this stuff he won. Well, I was just beside myself. And of course, this was before I had started to get back into the book. But anyway, so she finished what she was doing, and I told her she did a very nice job, and she could go back to the med room and put her pills away. So that's what she did. So of course, I had to talk to Mr. Duffy. So I did talk to him for a long time, explained to him who my great-grandfather was, and he told me a lot of different things about the store, and he told me a lot of different little stories, et cetera, which of course a lot of it I have put in the book. Now, of course, unfortunately, he did pass maybe about 6 months later, and then about 8 months after that, his wife passed. So by this time, then, I'm really getting into doing this book, and I'm thinking to myself, boy, I know that Mr. Duffy had a daughter. So I scrounged around in that old Quarryville telephone book that I have. Don't throw that away. And so it turns out I found her name, and I called her up, and we must have talked for about an hour and a half. Now, she gave me all kinds of goodies that her father used to come home and say, and what they did, and what he did for the day, and et cetera, et cetera. But anyway, so she said that in the evening, she came home from school, and she'd help her mother get supper, and then they'd all sit down at the table, and they'd have a little prayer, and then he would start talking about Mr. Duffy's day at Watton Chant. And then he'd want to know what her and her brother did in school that day. So anyway, so at the end of the table, when they were finished eating, he always said, now you remember what the 3 swear words are that I do not want to hear in this house. And her, Patricia and her brother said, yes, Dad, we know what the 3 swear words are. They are Hagers, Hertzlers, and Adlers. Now, for those of you who are not around from Lancaster County, those are the 3 main stores that are in town. And he stressed this every day, that he never wanted to hear those words. I have been in contact with her, and she is now living at St. Anne's, and she said she did get a book, so that's good. Now, we're going to talk about Mr. Thomas Charles McKeel. Now, if any of you get the Lancaster paper, you should recognize that name. His son works there, grandson works there, now the great-grandson works there. But the reason that I brought him into this picture was because he had a great deal to do with the advertising. And the first thing he did when he got there at Watton Chant's is he looked at the papers and he said to the president of Watton Chant, well, why does this say Watton Chant at the top and then it says store closed on Monday? He said, that's very negative. He said, take that off of there. So they took that off of there immediately, and then the next thing that he started to do was put color ads in. And he did get quite a few national awards for the advertising that he did. He did eventually go back to the newspaper. And I did interview his son, and he had told me quite a few little things that are in the book. Okay. Another picture of real recent picture. Okay, now just to tell you a little bit about this, and you'll see some of these things over on the table. This is the 60th anniversary of the store. And as some of you may remember, their anniversaries were quite a production. They were about a week and a half long, and they had all kinds of celebrations. And they also had all kinds of nice celebrations and dinners just for the employees. Now, in this horse-drawn cart are 6 ladies, and each lady represented 10 years of fashion. And here's one of them. Meet my mother, Annie Watt Davis Clore. And she was to represent the first 10 years of the store of fashion. And there's quite a few other pictures that are over on the table of this, plus there's quite a few pictures in the book. So they did a lot of things to promote these, to promote the store during that. Now maybe some of you remember when you got the Intelligencer Journal in the morning, and there, right on top of where it said Intelligencer was this little gold key. and you take that key and you went down to Wanton Chance to see if it would open the treasure box. So it would open the treasure box, and then you may be lucky enough to get a prize. And there is some more stories about that in the book. I have a friend who was one of the girls that managed the treasure chest. And Sue, it was Claire. Another one of the nurse friends. Okay, let's see what we got here. Let's see, here's more of the anniversary. Even they had, every year, somebody composed a song. It was a different song every year, but it all had to do with where they came from and where they started and how long the store had survived. This is just some older pictures of the stock. Of course, this is the men's. Why doesn't that look hot in July? Another picture of the store. More recent picture of the store. Now, I'm just going to point out a few people here, if I can get the little thing to work. Of course, this is Peter T. Watt. Okay, and he married a second time, and he married this lady whose name is Laura Geiger. And my grandmother and my Aunt Catherine, my grandmother, Aunt Catherine, were about 9 years old when they were married. And this is my grandmother's brother. His name is James, and he was a missionary in India. And this is Donald, and he worked for a long time with the YMCA. And through that, he did a lot of religious speaking, etc., and also worked for the United Kingdom, setting up places where the World War I soldiers could get some kind of religious instruction. And he eventually started something called the Experiment in International Living. It's almost like a student exchange program. There is a chapter in the book about it. And also, if you read the book, you'll find out what his association was with John Fitzgerald Kennedy. Now, this is Charles, and he was the president of the store. And then this is the youngest sister, and her name was Laura. This, of course, you would recognize. This is at the corner of President and Marietta, and this was their home, which was designed by Mr. Urban. Now, the title of the book is Watt & Shand, East West Thames Best. And everybody says to me, well, where did East West Thames Best come from? Well, this is where it came from. This is the fireplace when you walk in the main door. And it means, and that's not spelled wrong, it means east, west, north, south. Wherever you go, home is best. And that's a Scottish statement. Oh, Christmas. Christmas at Watt & Shand's. What fun. There's Santa. Now, this was a little doll sitting over there in the corner, and I think I figured out that she's 112 years old by now. One time, Peter Watt took Catherine and Annie down to the store to see the Christmas decorations, and they saw this doll in the window, and they said, we want that doll for Christmas. Well, of course, as you can see, he got them the doll. That is the original hat, the original shoes. I don't have the doll dressed up too good because you can lift the dress and see her little pantaloons. And also in a little plastic bag over there is her little leather shoes. So everything is still intact. That's the same doll, same one that they played with. Now my cousin Ann and I played with that doll, but boy, I'll tell you, we were given a strict instructions before we picked it up. Now, more Christmas. This, of course, is Christmas with Santa Claus, and this just happened. Wait a minute. The little girl in the picture is one of my best friends, named Darlene. Okay, now, And the Shands and the Watts attended the First Presbyterian Church in Lancaster on Orange Street. And of course, that's where I went also. But now I live in southern Lancaster County, so I go to Chestnut Level Presbyterian. This is the stained glass window, which is dedicated to James Shand and his wife. This was given by their daughter. And of course, here is the one that is dedicated to the Watt family, to Peter and Lizzie Watt. And those windows, of course, are Tiffany windows, and they are in the First Presbyterian Church. This is just some of the windows that Mr. Duffy did. Now it's not advancing. Oh, you know, I bet I turned that thing again. Where's my helper? Can he fix this? or just advance it back there. Oh, there we go. There's a sample of the truck, and I have another sample of the truck over there. Next slide. And of course, this is Park City. And you see, at some point, Watt and Shand bought Hager's, and Hager's had already bought into Park City. So that's how that occurred. Next. This is the last slide, and this is a poster that's over here, and I think it's 1938. You have to look at the prices of the things. Well, you've been a very attentive audience. I certainly want to thank you very much, and I want to thank Mitch Dissinger for arranging all of this, and I certainly want to thank John and Karen Frymuth for helping me today. So, if you have any questions, comments, yes.
The facade that's there now, did you have any emotion or feelings about the fact that the facade of the building has been kept, which is very unusual?
Well, yes, it is unusual that has been done. And of course, my whole family was very, 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 very upset about it. But evidently, I guess that's the way the nation has been going, that people aren't really going down to department stores and buying things. But one thing which I thought was sort of comical, a friend of my sister's climbed over the fence when they were digging and took 2 bricks, brought them back to her place and had them framed and says Watt and Shand on it. So I have a brick and my sister has a brick. Any other comments or questions? Yes.
Do you have any contact with any of the Shands?
No, you know, my grandmother was very, very close with the Shands. In fact, the Shand daughter was in my grandmother's wedding. And it's funny because I guess it's just how different generations are or something. And of course, when I was born, all my mother could think about was taking me as a baby to see Mr. and Mrs. Shand. And they were all very close. But that just didn't materialize. I guess different directions. People go off and go to college, I don't know what really. And to tell you the truth, which I think is sort of surprising with this book, I have not heard from one of them, which I would have thought that I would have. So, but I didn't really concentrate on them in the book. There's a picture in them in the book of their initial family, the James Shand, the first one. But that's about all I put in, because I really didn't have that much info, and I didn't want to write anything that was wrong. So thank you for asking. Yeah. Anything else? Yes.
You said that Watt and Shand bought out Hager's. Do you know what year that would have been?
Oh, a wild guess would have been 90 something, maybe 91 or 89. Wild. That's a wild guess.
And I saw on the table you have a credit card that had the Hager name on and the Watt and Shand name on.
Right.
You used both names for a while?
Yes, he did. Yes. Now, over here on the table, you will see some china, and that china was a china set that James Shand and his wife Annie gave to Peter when Peter got married a second time. I have boxes and boxes of that china in my attic. And it's beautiful china, but I have used it a couple of times. But I mean, there is square plates, triangle plates. There's a little serving dish there. I think there's 5 of them in different sizes. I mean, and the silver platter. My mother used the china all the time, but I really haven't. So other things that are on that table is there is a picture there of the house, and then in the front is a picture of Lizzie and Peter. And also, there is some other things there about the anniversaries. There's also a citizenship paper which belonged to one of Peter Watt's nephews, because he brought 5 nephews over from Scotland to work in the store, and they did. And also, there's some things at the end of the table about Hamilton Watch. And Hamilton Watch, for years and years and years, you may have read some of this history in the paper lately, because Brett L. Miller has revised Hamilton Watch, and now they have it down at the corner of Duke and Chestnut. But Hamilton Watch was always a failing company, and they were losing money. So Peter Watt and James Shand were on something called a Board of Trade. And they got in and looked at the finances of the Hamilton Watch, and they couldn't believe it was still in existence. Completely turned that thing around and made it what it is today. And also that Board of Trade group with Peter Watt and James Shand there, they're the ones that brought Armstrong Cork to Lancaster County. They're also the ones that brought Staley Silk Mill. And you realize how much tax base that brought in for Lancaster to at least turn the lights on. It just amazes me that they brought all these companies in, and that is what built up Lancaster. So, now, any other questions? Yes.
When did the store close? And which corner of the square is it? I'm new to the community.
Oh, it's right in the center, right in Penn Square.
Which corner?
Well, it's where South Queen intersects to King. It's where the Marriott is now.
Okay.
Yeah. And as some of you know, this gentleman over here had just mentioned that to me, that they did save the front, the facade of that. So,
And it closed down when?
if I remember correctly, I'll try to keep that date out of my head. But I think it was like 91, not 92, 91. Yeah. Yeah. I was just so glad that my grandmother never saw that. So, any other questions? Well, thank you very much, and thank you. Oh, do you have another question?
There's a question over here.
Oh, you have a question?
Lady over there.
I'd just like to make a comment that there is no question, but I could have provided you with another picture on your table because I bought my wedding dress at Watt and Shand's.
Oh. Well, I wanted to especially thank this person. I've never met her before. Her name is Kathy. She brought me a framed little picture of Watt and Shand. You'll have to look at it because up in the right-hand corner is a little medallion that shows the Penn Square Monument. So it'd be interesting. I don't know, research that a little bit and see where that came. Thank you, Kathy. Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Nancy. Thanks for coming tonight. Make sure you go up and look at the memorabilia. See you in April.